Hello, this is Joseph Carlson in this episode 5 of The Grief of Politics, and I'm here with my co-host, Avin Carroll. Avin, how you doing?
Doing good, everyone.
Yeah, another month, man. I was just talking to my wife. It'll be crazy when we get to, like, double digits, you know? That'll be nuts. And then, like, imagine if we get to 100 episodes. That'll be weird, because that'll be several months. 100 of them, if you were.
Yes, many years.
It'll be many years. So, whoa. So you, it was your topic this week. What was the topic, Evan? Remind the people at home what the topic was. It was a surprise. What is the surprise now that you should probably unwrap the surprise?
I was just about to say, when we left off at our last episode, actually, I had several ideas I kind of wanted to go over and didn't announce the idea. And so this week we're going to be talking about some tax reform that's happened here in Washington, but also that's being proposed nationally, specifically pertaining to changes to the capital gains tax, as well as changes in the 1031 exchange, which I'll explain in more detail kind of as we go on if you're not familiar with it.
Good, because being an English major, this was a rough month for me. I'm not going to lie, a rough topic. There was a lot of... the first article, which if you can find again and share, you did share it early, but I got 404 down, so I wasn't able to read it. So maybe you could go over the first.
Unfortunately, I don't remember what the source was because the link, only the second half of the link posted. That's why at 404.
Well, do you want to just go micro then and talk about our state and then go on to the national stage, as it were? So do you want to talk?
Yeah, and the first article actually was specifically about the recent changes or the past legislation in Washington to introduce a capital gains tax, which anyone here in Washington listening, yourself, are probably familiar. This is not the first time that the Washington State Legislature has passed a capital gains tax.
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember.
And I believe it was 2 other times that they've passed it, and both times it was shot down by the Supreme Court because in Washington State, an income tax is illegal. They cannot propose an income tax unless it is applied equally to all people in the state. And the whole purpose for it is they want to make our tax structure more progressive. And so, like, there's no way in the world the Democratic legislature in Washington is ever going to pass a tax that applies to everyone equally,
right? Yeah,
as an income tax,
right?
So
well, I mean, if you don't have money, you can't pay, like thing.
Exactly, and I mean, the legislature's argument, it's a pretty strong argument, is that in Washington State, the average Washingtonian pays 18% of their income in taxes. And the top 1% of Washingtonians only pay about 3% because for those not familiar, Washington State is a no income state or no income tax state.
Right.
We only have property taxes, sales taxes.
Right. We're not like Oregon and I mean there's tons of states.
There's only 7 states that don't have an income tax.
Ooh.
Most states do. Like when I lived in Arizona, they did. Idaho does. Oregon does. Obviously, California. Right. Most states have an income tax, and I believe most states' income tax is a progressive tax. Washington State, however, is one of the most heavily taxed states in the country, even without an income tax. So there is a ton of resistance, even from the average Washingtonian, against having an income tax.
Right.
And so
that makes sense.
A little bit of background on the income tax that was passed. It's a 7%, or not income tax. You could call it that. I mean, a lot of media is calling this capital gains tax an income tax. And the reason is because the Supreme Court has ruled that a capital gains tax is an income tax, and the Democratic legislature is hoping to prove that it is an excise tax, not an income tax.
So that's obviously happening on the state level. It'll probably go to the state Supreme Court, or has it already?
It's already being challenged. Okay. And I do believe it'll get challenged at the state Supreme Court level. I don't believe it can go to the federal Supreme Court, but the federal Supreme Court has ruled that capital gains are income, which means taxing them is an income tax. So I don't think it will pass. There's been a long-standing theory that the Democratic members that passed it want it to be challenged in court because they think they've found a way that they can prove it. And so if they can, it's kind of a loophole that gets them into an income tax. So what it is it is a 7% capital gains tax.
So is this from the article you read, or is this just background still?
The second article actually goes into it as well. So if you go into the second article,
is this
it does
the
cover...
one from the Puget Sound Business Journal?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry. So it's from the Puget Sound Business Journal, and it's just entitled "Experts Share What You Should Know About Washington's New Capital Gains Tax," and it's written by Rick Morgan. It was posted on May 5th, 2021, 2:12 a.m. Eastern time. It looks like. So good on you, Rick, because that's like 11 our time where he's just polishing away all this. But yeah, so I read the article too. It is interesting, but go ahead. Sorry. So I just wanted to, say where we got the info for that.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. I don't think of that, and so that's why this is your podcast, and I'm just a contributor, guest host.
You're a co-host, but that's fine. Again, I only podcast alone, and you don't podcast, so we're doing a joint podcast together. I mean, I do have guests on my show, but we don't cite facts. It's more
with you,
like how I feel. Like that's my other podcast.
Yeah. So what it is it's a capital gains tax of 7% on sales of more than $250,000.
Right.
So that would be actualized gains on investments, right. Be it stocks, crypto, property, real estate, so on and so forth.
One thing I did like really quickly they mentioned is that married couples won't get double gains taxed. So they're just saying that since you're considered a couple, you're almost considered one entity. So if it says here, would only pay, they would only pay 7% on tax on sales of more than 250, not 500,000. So
meaning that you don't get benefits of being married in this case.
Right. But you still don't get penalized either, so it's kind of
you're being taxed at $250,000 and above,
right?
Whether or not you are married, so you don't have the benefit of being married like we do with income tax, where the number doubles.
Right. Yeah.
I
see what you're saying.
Yeah. So one way or the other, you're going to get taxed at $250,000 or above. So I mean, it's actually a pretty low threshold. A lot of people don't recognize this, but the details in this law, I couldn't find anything that really dove into kind of all of the special exceptions and all the little details on it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's probably another 2 episodes of that, of like really, and I'll be honest, right. I don't know if I want to do that.
We can bring in a CPA and have them go into all of the...
They're like, wait, how many episodes? We're like, we're on episode 7. We see a lot of growth. And they're like, we're not going to go in your podcast. Like, this is really not going to happen.
This is actually a pretty low threshold. Now, the state's arguing that it's a very small percentage of people that would be affected, so my suspicion is it wouldn't apply in this case. But technically speaking, if you owned a rental property, and say you bought a foreclosed home and then fixed it up and held it for a few years, and the market was growing like it is now, say you bought it 7-8 years ago, you bought it foreclosed, you fixed it up, you turn around and sell it, and you have $300,000-$400,000 in equity. Now, not only do you pay the taxes you would normally pay on that rental property, now you're also paying an additional 7% because that's over $250,000, and that is a capital gain. So there's a lot of feeling that like, hey, this is only going to affect the rich, but the reality of it is that this $250,000 threshold, it's low enough that it could affect a lot of people in that middle class range that maybe have some extra assets on the side. Probably more upper middle class, but we're not talking like uber wealthy.
Right.
This isn't like a Bezos tax.
But this does go to like, again, my English major brain, this does go into what is a minimum wage, what is a medium income nowadays, what, inflation involved. Like there's all these other factors of like, it's not just like you said, it'll affect more people because that's just the cost of things now, right? So it's no longer just some random, like, oh, it'll affect the rich. I will ask, seeing on this, I don't understand, like with the other article we're going to go to on the national level, they do say why they're making a lot of those proposals to pay for infrastructure and things like that. Did you find anything on this? Are they saying why they're doing this? Is there a project like, I mean, obviously there's projects like roads and things, but is there a specific thing that they're like, we want to fund the transit, whatever, is this?
Unfortunately, it was in the other article.
Oh, the one that got 404'd? Yeah.
Sorry. But there is actual specific things that they want to fund with it. Here's kind of like my concern, right? I look at this one as if it actually sticks. I don't trust our state.
What?
And it's not that I don't trust our current government. It's that historically speaking in Washington state, we have one of the worst track records of saying, we're going to pass this tax and we're only going to use it to pay for this thing. We'll say roads. You've driven on our roads. You know how terrible they are. You know
They're
why?
bad.
Because every time they pass one of these taxes and they say, we're only going to use it for this one thing, they end up moving the money into the general fund and then using it for a pet project and then totally screw over the original purpose.
Right.
Unless there's a legally binding item that it's attached to. And I bring that up specifically to talk about ST3. ST3 is bonded. And so in that law, the income that they're making on taxes and tolls that's meant to go pay for ST3 is specifically tied to it by law because it's bonded and they have to pay it.
Is that the new transit line, the ST3? Yeah.
Yep.
I heard they were going to connect the link rail. I mean, I read this years ago. There, because in Tacoma it only goes a few miles where we are. But I heard they were going to try to connect it north. So not only can you take the Sounder, but you're going to take that link rail up.
Yep.
And that's probably not going to. It's going to be
2033 or something like that. 2032.
Dude, I'm marking the calendar because I want to ride it. Even if I'm an old man, I want to get on and be like, "Get out of my way!" Like, and
it's going to go all the way up here to Everett.
Nice.
The light rail.
Yeah.
It's going to go all the way down to Tacoma.
Yeah.
It actually comes into Federal Way way sooner than you'd think. I was surprised. I think it's like 2026 or 2025. It's supposed to be in Federal Way.
See, all that kind of stuff I think is, it sucks that it's so far out, but it is necessary, Like I've ridden public transportation. I've been on the roads just in a car. And I'm like, if there's anything to alleviate this.
I'm gonna stop this conversation before we go too far on the tangent.
Are we gonna do transportation? Is that gonna be your next surprise episode? Mine's gonna be something else. You're like, we're doing transportation, Joe.
Honestly, maybe because I could just take this over on my rant on ST3. I will say this about.
Well, put a bonnet in your hat, and we can do that.
I will say this about it while we're talking about it. Yeah, it sucks it's so far out. Yes, I think it's a pretty cool thing. I kind of like the idea and the concept behind it. I think when ST3 passed, it was the largest municipal project in the history of the United States.
Yeah.
At like $50 billion to build this all out. And guess what? Sound Transit's own projections, their own projections say that it will only serve 0.1% of the transit population, meaning it will have zero impact on traffic. And you know how terrible our roads and our traffic here is. It is. Yeah. It's pretty. It'll be good for the people that can use it.
We don't want to. I don't want to get into that. I will.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so we're on a tangent. Like we could totally go into that. I just had to get that out because I watch the construction every day because it's going like crazy up here. They're coming into Linwood in 2024. So they're doing like all of the dirt work right now. They're grading the ground. They're putting up the supports, putting in the tracks. It's awesome. I'm a huge engineering nerd. It's really cool to drive by it.
Well, yeah, like I said, it does suck. I will say that this will affect. I think reading the article and the stuff you gave, it will affect more people than I think. But
well, here's the deal, though.
Like you said, yeah.
I don't trust the state to actually ultimately not bring in an income tax. If they can get it passed, then it opens up the avenue for them to bring in more taxes. And here's why I think that's going to ultimately happen. and why I think the average Washingtonian going, yeah, tax the rich and pay for all these programs for the poor, because that's what it's intended for. Is there's a pretty good portion of it tied to racial equity programs.
Yeah, that's on the national level too. We'll talk about that later, but there's
Yep.
a big thing in the national bill about that kind of stuff.
There's some money tied up in there for I mean they're all for typical Democratic feel good warm and fuzzy programs. Not saying that none of these programs don't have purpose,
Right.
and not to say that they don't
It would
have
be the stereotypical, I get
bleeding heart liberal
right. I'm not offended.
programs.
It's fine. You can say what you feel. It's fine. I'm not offended. It's fine.
And great, fine, whatever. It's supposed to raise $550 million, if I remember correctly, on the numbers out of this tax. Here's the deal. I don't think it's going to. I think the uber wealthy, the ones that they're really trying to target here, the Bill Gates, the Jeff Bezoses, the Steve Ballmers, the other billionaires that live in Washington State, the multi-millionaires that live in Washington State, that are really the ones who live off of their capital gains, right? They just get around it in other ways. They're like, oh, cool. Well, I don't want to pay this extra 7%, so they establish residency in a different state so they don't have to pay it. Or they do things like, oh, well, never mind. I'm not going to sell this stock. I'm going to borrow against this stock.
Yeah.
And then I'll just pay back against the low interest rate loan because it's secured.
Yeah. I think
They'll find other ways around it, and the state isn't going to raise as much money as they think they're going to. So then they're going to have to figure out, well, crap, now we're committed to these programs that we said we were going to fund, but we didn't raise enough money. How are we going to do it? Let's lower the threshold, or let's come up with another tax program. And that's my own personal opinion. I think that's where it's going to go.
No, I mean, I agree with you. It is kind of a murky thing. I mean, at the end of that thing, the heart of the issue is people, there's been several documentaries on this. There's one on Netflix. I forget what it's called, but it talks about, like everybody talks about a fair share, but that's like individuals. What happens when corporations are just like, oh, I'm in the Cayman Islands. You can't tax me. What did Google pay next to nothing last year for taxes? There's been tons of records of that kind of stuff
Oh, and there's all kinds of loopholes for them to get out of it, too. We'll talk kind of in Biden's new tax plan for the Helping America plan, or American Family Plan, whatever he's calling it.
There's a lot in that. I got to say, even as being a liberal hippie, I'm like, well, this is pretty ambitious. I don't think he's going to do it. I mean, I hope. But
there's a ton of stuff in the plan, and that article actually did a really good job of just like, here's the facts, here's what's in it. They really took.
They sure did, Evan. Why don't we talk about it now? Because we're talking about it, but we're not talking about it. So you sent it to me. It was from Investopia. Oh, Investopedia. Sorry.
Investopedia.
Yeah, Investopedia. I don't know.
But hang on a second. Before you keep going, I'm looking for the specifics about what the capital gains tax is.
Oh, the local. Okay. Yeah.
There's several planned considerations the taxpayers might consider anticipating, blah, 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 blah. They're expecting the money to come in 2023.
Ooh, that's pretty quick, actually.
Yeah, so it goes into effect next year, and then people would pay it at the end of 2022, and then it would be in the coffers of 2023.
Okay. That makes sense.
I found another article that was talking about it, but it doesn't talk about what it's being used for.
I would imagine it would be all the liberal hippie things you just mentioned, programs and such, and roads and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff.
What does the legislation do?
Yep.
What sales would be taxed? Who likes this? Who doesn't?
I wonder who doesn't like it.
We already know.
I think
What
I know
about
who
the
doesn't
tech?
like it.
What about the tech industry? What happens next? And then likely to court. I want to know specifically what it's supposed to pay for.
I would imagine it would be what we spoke about.
It is. Don't get me wrong. It is all the bleeding heart programs.
Yep. Good. Make them hearts bleed. That's all I gotta say. Bleed them out.
Aww. Would go towards early education and childcare. The majority of the funds would go to early education and childcare.
It's still important.
Budget earmarks monies for low-income families, childcare programs, forest and wildfire management, which, I don't know if you knew this or not, but they actually did approve the requested amount of money for wildfire management this year. They've been begging for years for money, and they finally
That's
got
good
it, which
because
is
I read
great.
an article today that in California they're going to have fire season again. It's only May, so
The additional federal money will include more than $500 million in rental assistance. I don't know where that federal money is coming from. Under the tax, the first $250,000 of capital gains would be exempt from the tax, as would specific asset sales. For example, stock sales higher than $250,000 would be taxed at 7%. Real estate would not be. So they are excluding real estate. Okay, that's cool. So if you sold your rental property, you wouldn't get hit with the tax.
That's good.
Only stocks and other assets.
maybe something to tell your other business clients and your new business to say, guess what? Good news, everybody.
Well, yeah, but so as we go into the Biden tax plan, the Biden tax plan specifically wants to eliminate the 1031 exchange right now. So we can go into that. That program's actually
There's some things
like
that
you
are
said, extremely ambitious.
Yeah, Investopedia basically said that some things are proposed and some things are enacted.
Yeah,
which I liked.
And what's enacted, what's proposed. So what this is an Investopedia, Biden's tax plan. What's enacted, what's proposed. Author is Michelle Scott. It was published on April 29th, 2021.
Yeah.
This article is very long and in-depth, explaining what's in the program, what's
Sure
not,
is, Evan.
breaking down
It's actually-
all the different tax programs.
The one thing I will say that really caught my eye was there's one paragraph here that I just want to read. The Biden's administration's tax proposal would raise the corporate tax rate, impose new minimum taxes to prevent profitable U.S. businesses from escaping taxes through aggressive tax planning, repeal incentives for offshore jobs, end preferences for the fossil fuel industry, and strengthen corporate tax law enforced by the Internal Revenue Service. And then it said, a particular goal of the Biden plan is to discourage U.S. corporations from moving intangible assets and related profits abroad to controlled subsidiaries in countries with lower tax rates than those in the U.S. The plan's 21% tax is partially focused on global intangible low tax income, which they call GILTI, which I find hilarious. It is GILTI, GILTI. Apparently that is a thing. Global intangible low tax income. Realized by shifting profits from easily moved assets such as intellectual property rights to low tax jurisdictions. In addition, the Biden administration is seeking through multilateral negotiations to have other countries join in establishing a global minimum tax to prevent countries from seeking competitive advantage by cutting corporate taxes. So those two things hopped out at me when I was reading this article. The idea that they're trying to close the loophole that you and I have heard for years about, and that companies are doing, where they're going to the Cayman Islands. They're going to these places going, oh, actually most of Google's in the Cayman Islands, and so we don't have to pay this massive amount of tax, even though we employ people all over. And
wasn't a big deal. Google lost their lawsuit in like Ireland a few years ago because they were hiding their income.
They tried to use Ireland or whatever to...
as part of the EU.
Yeah.
And they ended up having to pay like a massive amount of money. Maybe it was Amazon. One of the two of them
I think it was
in the EU had their headquarters in Ireland because Ireland was a bit like a kind of a tax haven within the EU.
Yeah, that's one thing that hopped out at me. And then it also said, this is to help. It would provide free education from pre-kindergarten for 3 and 4-year-olds through 2 years of community college. So all the way up to that, assist historically black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and institutions such as Hispanic serving institutions, Asian Americans and Native American Pacific Islanders serving institutions, and other minority serving institutions. They would support paid family and medical leave, child nutrition, expanded child care, and extension of the currently enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies. And he'd also ask Congress to extend expiring individual tax credits enacted in the American Rescue Plan. So that seems like that's proposed. I will say, as someone who works in the trades, I'm a little upset that the free college and everything doesn't have to do with the trades, because I have to be sponsored to get into the trades, and I still have to pay money to like go to school. And I've read several articles where the trades are just screaming for people, and they're giving people cash signing bonuses and stuff if you stay in for so long. So I wish that was something where in this proposal they would maybe waive some of those entry fees and say, listen, if you sign up for this, we'll pay your entry fee to get into this trade school, and then if you do well, you still get your signing bonus and everything. But we want to lower the threshold for people to get in these. And then maybe, I know you can go and sign up, but I know too you can be sponsored, and I don't understand how that works with unions. It's been offered to me a couple times with guys that I know. I'm a signatory to the union. I'm not in the union, so I've talked to several people in the union, and I've had offers of like, if you want to go in, just tell me and I'll sponsor you, and you can go in and all this stuff. So I don't know if that means my fee is dropped or what that means, but I think that's one thing. I agree with Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. There isn't a lot of talk about trades in here.
Actually, I would agree with you on that. I mean, I'm a huge proponent for the trades, and largely actually because of Mike Rowe and a lot of his awareness he's brought to it is really like, hey, he's right. Like, I've got several friends that are plumbers that make really good income, like well into six figures.
Yeah, you have a pension as well. The ones I talked to in the carpentry trade, it doesn't take that long for your pension to kid in too. So a lot of them were like, hey, I have a 5-year plan. My pension starts. I paid in. I can go do this other thing like build homes, and I'm still getting my pension. I still have an income while I'm doing this. It's pretty amazing, and you get benefits. And I've actually been on job sites where union members have come after negotiating a part of their contract where they talk about, well, we negotiated on this day off, and we gave them this day, but we still get this day. Like, they have a seat at the table to say this is unacceptable. We want this holiday off. Like, all that kind of stuff. I mean, and you get, medical. And then, FYI, I went to a job site one time. Like, a guy came up to me and said, "You're getting $90 an hour, right?" And I was like, "What?" And he was a carpenter. And I was like, "No, I'm not, because I'm, signatory. I'm not in the union." And he goes, "Well, you're at least getting it's a state-run job. You get prevailing wage." And I said, "Yeah, I get that." He said, "Okay. Well, they get the prevailing wage, which in Washington State is anywhere from $45 to $51 an hour, depending on what county you're in. And then they get their union wage on top of that. So that's why it was capping out at $90.
Okay.
So if you're at a state-run job, that's just part of the union. So that's one thing. Reading this, I was kind of disappointed with. I really wish people would talk about the trades more. I run into so many people that are passionate about just doing a job in a trade, and it's a job, you got whatever, but if you get so many weeks off a year, that's signed and that has been negotiated. So, since I'm a signage into the union, when I'm working in our shop, I have none of those benefits. So if they tell me, like, you get this much time off and you're going to be to work this days, I have to deal with it. But in the union, you can say, no, I think I'm going to get my 3 weeks off a year or 4 weeks off a year. And again, that's something that I was kind of disappointed when I was reading this. Like, they didn't bring up the trades. That would have been a big deal. If there is a fee to get in, it would have been a great way to waive those fees and have people just go in and then on their merits be able to make it through the trades and still get the signing bonuses. And that could have started, and the trade probably could have got a lot more people in, so.
And again, like, I'm a huge proponent for it. I think we need to have more scholarships, training opportunities. Like, I've even thought about charities, programs like mission work through church. And I've thought about one of the big things that we could really do from a church perspective. I know a lot of people in my church that are tradesmen, again, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, that make very good incomes. And I think it'd be really cool to set up a program in economically depressed countries, training people with job skills, going down, especially a lot of those countries that have much lower building codes or restrictions on that kind of stuff, where you could really go in and teach them how to do, here's how we would do a plumbing job in the United States. Here's how we would do an electrician's job in the United States, where they're being trained up to very high building code standards. Yeah.
Well, not
so
only
even
that,
if they're not held to them, they would still have that high level of skill. They could come to the States and have that ability to get into a workforce as long as they can get sponsored into a union. Yeah. But maybe not. Like, there's certain areas where
that could be part of the union too. I don't know how they recruit from out of the country. They could find anyway. I know there's vote carpentry and stuff in schools, and I know.
So Joe, you need to write Joe and tell him, like, hey, add this to the plan because we need more tradespeople. And specifically, like, you read through this, and the target is meant to be marginalized populations.
Yeah, which makes sense.
I read this, and I'm like, cool, this is great, but this is all racially driven. This isn't driven by income inequality or poor, depressed economic regions or zones in the United States. This is all driven tribal colleges, black colleges, Pacific Islanders, Native Pacific Islanders, Asian Americans. Like this is all driven by race, and right now that's a big, huge thing in the United States. It's a really heated issue, so like it's a hot button, and it makes
but I mean, there's been studies come out that by saying these things about minorities, you're basically saying poor, which is terrible. But I think maybe they have some data that saying like we're investing in these because we have data to back up that these are the poor neighborhoods. Not to say that it's right, and that
But you are here intentionally excluding any
the white people,
white poor.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of the economically depressed regions in like Tennessee and the Appalachians and a lot of those areas have literally no benefit. You're turning your back on them. So all those same people that everyone kind of got up in arms that Trump was after all these people for coal mining, even though they ended up not really being able to do anything about it. Like those are all the same people are like, we've been forgotten about. You've left us behind. They're still getting left behind.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. That could be another episode. My thing is it's complex because it's like the coal mining thing is like we stopped using horse-drawn carrying buggies a long time ago.
But instead of saying like, hey, this was a massive and extremely important part of our economy for decades, we as a society need to reinvest into these communities that are now entirely economically crushed because this industry is dying. Instead, because they're white, we're going to turn our backs on them.
Yeah, it's white.
If it was any other color that I replaced that word, if I replaced the word white with any other color and said that, everyone right now would be up in arms about it.
Maybe. Yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
Yeah. Yes.
No,
thank you.
But I that's going to be another episode because there was a thing with the like learn to code and all that stuff about those people and like what they did with they did start those programs and they didn't get a lot of traction.
I've got an acquaintance. I'm not going to call him a friend. Really cool guy. I've met him several times. Lisa knows him, who is a pastor in South Seattle. And unfortunately, with COVID, his church collapsed this year.
Wait, you mean people just didn't show up, right? It didn't just the building didn't collapse, right?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
I was like, whoa.
The church closed this year and dissolved, and so people had to go to other churches.
That's way better than.
But Javon started. He works for Amazon. Yeah. And so he was a bivocational pastor. He was a pastor and he had a full-time job because his church didn't produce enough to pay him a living like full-time wage.
Okay.
So this year or last year with COVID, he started up like a scholarship charity organization that specifically teaches minority children tech, which made me really excited. Like, again, being in IT...
Well, it's all trades, right? It's still a different trade. It's like you need people to do that.
It's not a unionized trade, but it is still a trade. And so since I got into IT, I'm like, man, I wish more people knew that like IT isn't just programming and coding. Because a lot of people are like, I can't sit in front of a computer and write code. My brain doesn't work that way.
And you're like, no, man, you're out installing
You're
stuff
installing physical equipment. You're plugging cables in. You're running cables. Like these are still IT trades that pay really good wages.
Yeah.
Like
imagine
where I'm at
if you
right
were
now.
Unionized.
Where I'm at right now with BECU, like their service desk makes about $50,000 a year. Not bad. And service desk is entry-level IT work. Most people that start at the service desk have the opportunity to move up into system administration, network administration, engineering, and they can really move up. We've totally gone tangent.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. No, my thing is, I think it's one thing that upset me reading it, and we talk about what upset us is like, I do think there needs to be more of a focus on the trades. Obviously the minority thing upset you. What about this tax increase for the wealthy? Did that stick out to you? Were you like, oh man, they're really giving it to them?
Again, this is one of those things where it sounds really good on paper, and I don't think it's going to generate the revenue.
Because this is still just proposed. This hasn't passed, right? This is part of
correct. And the likelihood that it'll pass in this form is probably not very high.
Right.
I think,
like
you said, they asked for a lot of stuff, and I think they asked for a lot of stuff so they can negotiate back down.
Yeah, this is one of the things reading it going, I mean, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. One, if you only do like one thing, then you're only going to get the one thing, and then everybody's going to be like, why didn't you try for more? And then if you try for more, then it's like there's too much in this, you got to trim it down. So I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
So who's the really big like Seattle billionaire that's always like, yeah, my people need to pay more taxes? No, not Dan Price. I mean, he's not a billionaire; he's a millionaire. But there's another really big one.
Evan. I get my M's and B's mixed up with.
I think it's Chris something, but I can't remember for sure. He's the makes pillows and blankets and stuff, and he's come out and been like, I can only buy so many yachts and cars, and those only provide so many jobs, right? So, like, my impact on the economy through taxes, like sales taxes, is not very big because eventually I'm going to just not buy stuff.
Yeah, but I hate this. Go ahead, finish your argument.
So his argument is like, yeah, I should pay more income taxes and I should pay more capital gains taxes because I can only buy so many things to help the economy.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of his argument. He's a pro-taxed wealthy person.
Okay. I thought you went the other way because
no.
You always hear about that of like, well, the money will trickle down, and I'm like, when has it trickled down?
There is a truth to that to a degree, right? There gets to a tipping point where you don't spend money proportional to your income anymore, and it doesn't trickle down. It doesn't generate jobs. It just keeps accumulating.
Well, plus they buy stock options back all the time. They buy their own stock back, and then they quadruple and whatever, and they don't get employees, and they don't.
When you have billionaires that are in publicly traded companies, that's true. But a lot of these people like aren't even in publicly traded companies, or they don't buy the stock back. They just got paid, like Bill Gates. Right, like he was paid in large amounts of stock, but he also founded the company, so he started off with a huge ownership percentage. And then all that time when he was getting dividend payments and everything else on that stock was just reinvesting, buying more stock.
Right.
So over time, now he's crazy wealthy, and we'll probably never know how much money Melinda takes in the divorce. Although she's already gotten $1.8 trillion transferred to her.
I mean, I don't want to. Anyway, I heard some stuff about that today that I would also probably walk away from Bill Gates.
Yeah, there's been some stuff that's starting to kind of come out that's like, ooh.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right.
So in the tax increases for the wealthy section here, they talk about like the proposed income tax, the top rate would bump up to 39.6 from 37%. Okay. That's the top rate. So earnings over that top metric, only earnings over that top metric would be taxed at that 39.6 instead of 37. That's not a huge jump. I don't mind that. It's a very small percentage of Americans that are going to pay it. And honestly, anyone who's earning in that top bracket doesn't need that extra 2.6%.
Yeah.
They're not going to die.
Yeah, they're fine.
Any of my Republican friends out there and extremely conservative friends out there, just be honest, right?
You're
like, just
fine.
own it.
Fine.
They're going to be okay.
Yeah,
this isn't making their income tax rate nearly 40%. This is only taxing earnings over that marker.
Right. So you're not
at that.
Yeah. You're fine. You're fine.
It's the long-term capital gains tax increase of almost 100%, from 20% to 39.6%.
Yeah, that's
that I look at and I'm like, okay. First off, what?
Yeah. It's almost like they would have done a better job of tiering it. So, like, this is broken down by years, right? Like 20, whatever the years are in here. If they would have been like, hey, this year or these 2 years, it's going to go from 20 to 22 or 24%. And then in 2 years after that, so you ease into being taxed in a way. You know what I mean? Like, so it doesn't just hit you that 1 year, because that happened privately.
And again, like, the people that this is going to impact have high power accountants and attorneys that help them structure and move money and set up different plans and programs to get around it. Like, cool. This tax for capital gains only impacts people that have incomes over $1 million. A very small percentage of people. Right. When we're saying incomes over $1 million, that means all income combined. So capital gains income as well as regular salary work income, rental income, anywhere you're earning income combines into this $1 million. And if you hit that income threshold, then your capital gains are going to be taxed at this amount. what that turns into is they bring up in the article, this article is super, super detailed. So anyone who's interested in the specifics of this should really dive into it. Again,
it is very detailed, and
this is Investopedia, Biden's tax plan explained, April 29th of this year, which is really great. So I didn't even realize this was the case. There's a 3.8% tax on investment income, like a surtax that just exists. So the 39.6% would also have this 3.8% added, meaning it's actually 43.4% is going to get taxed. For people that live in states that have income taxes, they could be paying nearly 50% on capital gains if their income's over $1 million. Their projection is 48.6, but like here in Washington, if our capital gains tax passes, it would be 50.4. Meaning, I don't want to pay half of my gains. Like, I've had my money in this investment for all this time. If I'm going to cash out $1 million of it, like, I don't want to give the government $500,000. Was my investment even worth it? So now you start looking at these uber wealthy, and here's your side effects. The uber wealthy who are already invested aren't going to sell. They're going to do low interest rate loans. They're going to borrow against it. They're going to pull money out more slowly, whatever they need to do to get around the tax. They're going to hide from the tax. It's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you be able to offset that by just, like you said, taking less out than you normally would? So it's like, well, if I need to
Or you take it out more slowly.
And
they talk about that too with people with 401ks. They say, like, this isn't going to impact most Americans because the vast majority, I think they say 74% of Americans have their investments in 401ks.
Right.
So even people with $5 million in their 401k aren't going to pay this tax because you're going to be pulling out like a minimum deduction, right? Or a minimum withdrawal.
Every month.
So maybe you're pulling out $200,000 a year to live off of, even if you're doing really well. That's a lot of money to pull out. But we'll say that's someone who's done really well. Like, they're going to pay the normal capital gains rate. They're not going to pay this jacked up capital gains rate. By jacked up, I don't mean it like it's a jacked, like, this is screwed up. Why would we do that? I mean, like, it's like on steroids, capital gains tax.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
But I don't think it's going to generate the revenue because the wealthy people are going to find other ways to get around it. Here's your other challenge.
Well, that's
I'm super wealthy.
Well,
I want to invest in something. I want to put my money into something because, like, I don't want it parked and not earning me income. I'm way less likely to put my money into an investment that would pay government tax revenue on this because I've got $10 million that's sitting around in cash I want to invest. Well, I'm not going to anymore because half of my growth, half of my profit is going to be paid to the government.
But the one thing it didn't say in here, what if you were to transfer it to, like, a nonprofit, whatever? I mean, would that be exempt because you're transferring money, you're not withdrawing money? It's like if you move it from one place to another and it doesn't say it in here, but I wonder if there is some weird byline in there like, hey, if
you take the profit, so it's really going to depend on how they define taking the profit. If you actualize the gain, if you actually gain on the money, then you would pay the tax. Okay. So I don't think that transferring would be a way to do it. Maybe you move it into an account in a different country or you establish residency in a different country. Right. But I think the big way that they're going to get away with it is you're going to see a lot of people dump their tax at the end of the year if this passes, or dump their profits.
Okay.
So you'll see a huge sell-off in the stock market at the end of the year of the uber wealthy. How much they own in the stock market, we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, because they'll have to report that stuff, yeah.
Because they'll be taking their money out if this passes. Because, right. I mean, I'm going to do whatever I can if I've got exposure to this to make sure I'm not losing that extra 23%. Yeah. And then they'll park that money elsewhere.
Well, that's the first part I read that I was impressed about, them trying to close loopholes, though. So will they be able to do that if they close those loopholes of, like, where you're going to...
If this law goes into effect in 2022, then I'm going to sell everything I need to sell in 2021 to make sure I actualize my profits this year before I have to pay taxes. And then you find other investments that aren't going to be subject to this. Buying businesses, investing in businesses, maybe commercial real estate, like other places where you're not going to be subject to this tax. And then you park and wait for the tax code to change again. Because, I mean, Lord, how often does the tax code change in the States? Oh, my gosh,
it's already changed. Changed with Trump, and it's going to change with Biden. It's like every I got to say, without looking at the numbers, I'm sure every administration, every president has changed the tax code in some way or another, you know?
Oh, yeah, they always do. Because they all have their own kind of agenda. Again, like... I get where they're going with this, but I don't think they're going to make the revenue that they think it is. Maybe they are. Maybe they've got a lot of economists and CPAs and other people advising them. They're going like, okay, so like if we do this many people would normally make this much money based off of historical things, but this many people are going to hide the revenue or find other ways to get around it or sell in advance. And so we think like if we adjust there, but I don't think they do. I think that these dollars that are put in here are a marketing plan about convincing Americans why we want to pass it. And so they don't take real numbers. I think they take inflated numbers so they can say, see, it's going to raise all this money and we can pay for all these things. And then later on come back and say, oh, we didn't
is
get
their
this much money.
advisor? That seems really foolish that they brought Kermit the Frog into the...
You didn't know that?
I did not. It seems
No.
pretty foolish.
Kermit actually has his PhD in economics.
You know
Joe. What do you have against
I bet
Kermit?
he does have some crazy degree. I think it's a little bit of both of what you're saying. I think they did bring...
What do you got against green people, Joe?
Well, they're green. Nothing.
It's okay to be green.
It's okay to be green. Yeah, he said that there's a whole hit song. I think they did both. I think they brought in the CPAs like you talked about. I think they brought in all the smart people. And I do think there was a thing of like, we could spend this a certain way, as we've just talked about, CPAs and accountants are very good at, tricks with
numbers
yeah,
to make
so they
sure
could say,
that it looks a
well, yeah,
certain
if you
way.
look at it like this, you could look at it like this. But I do think generally, again, to broad stroke it again, the idea of just trying to close the loophole so these people like Google and Amazon can be like, I didn't make any money this year. It's like, you're Amazon, there's no way that you didn't make any money. Like,
in one of the proposals is like corporate income has a minimum tax rate. Like no matter what, you can't go below this number. There's a proposal that income earned in foreign countries has a minimum tax rate. So you're always going to be paying taxes at that tax rate. There's they want to step the corporate tax rate up from 21% to 28%.
Right.
And there's a lot of counter argument to that. There's a lot of argument that says like, hey, we're starting to get more manufacturing jobs back in the States. If we raise this corporate tax rate up too high, we're going to shove it back into foreign countries that have lower tax rates. We're not going to be competitive on the world marketplace anymore.
I think that I don't know I haven't decided what the next episode's going to be, but we have to do an episode on the semiconductor thing because that's a big piece of news that is affecting every part of life. And I think what's amazing,
the chip manufacturing,
the chip and what I think is amazing about it goes right into this of like, oh, we're just going to go to foreign countries. It's like so we're in this position right now with the chip shortage where we're not producing anything, so we can't control anything. And the companies that we're producing that stuff are paying for it are stockpiling their own chips because they're like, well, we see this coming, so we're just going to stockpile stuff for our phones, and then you guys are out of you're out of luck. And so I think we really need to have a serious discussion about Biden's had several people come in and talk to him about the logistics of creating a factory and creating a production line and all that, and it'll take years and all this stuff, but like it's important. And I think this has to go with this tax plan of like, guys, where are you gonna run? Like it doesn't matter anymore. Like do you want to control this and help out America and like our production, or do you just want to go to Taiwan, build a factory? What happens when like we've seen it, like not to say that there's going to be another pandemic soon, but what happens if there's another situation where there's a shortage? Okay, so now,
where is government's responsibility to create an environment that's like inviting to businesses to want to do business in the United States?
Well, like I wouldn't if I was
versus where is the responsibility of the business
but
to
that's the
reinvest
thing right
in its own
now is
country?
like
There's a balance.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing right now is they're just like, well, I mean, we decided a long time ago, well, it'd be cheaper to manufacture them over here because we only want to pay X amount of dollars for cars and iPhones and stuff like that. And we have to be like, okay, but now we're paying the price. Now we're paying the price. Cars aren't going off the line. Consoles aren't going off the line. Phones aren't going off the line except the ones again
computers,
that,
video cards.
So it's like we're paying
watches,
now for those cheap things now. So it's like, listen, I just have a big come to Jesus meeting in those meetings. If I was the president, I'm like, okay, guys, so you're gonna tell me about you're gonna tax me, so I'm gonna just go somewhere else and develop stuff there. It's like, okay, so then what happens when that shuts down and then you're not producing stuff for America? Like, build it here so we have a control of these pipelines, And like, it's going to cost a lot of money, but like,
and there's
what are we going to do?
a huge national defense argument on it too.
Yeah. Don't they put?
But this goes beyond even government responsibility and corporate responsibility too. That this comes down to American, like us as individuals, like we want the cheaper product.
Right.
And so we push a lot of pressure on companies. And then regulations within the SEC related to publicly traded companies, like when you're a publicly traded company, you are responsible to the shareholder before anyone else. Yeah. And so you always have to put shareholder supremacy before any other decision you make. Right. So
and now we're paying the price for that because it's like, should we have some chips here? Nah, probably not. We'll be fine. We're not fine. And it's,
we can squeeze an extra 5% margin by putting the factory in Taiwan, so we should do that because that's the right thing for the shareholder. It's really hard to justify it.
Well, like, okay, so I'm a big gamer, and one thing I thought was amazing when the new consoles were designed, and this actually has to do with taxes and money and all this, but the idea was that, like, so everybody complained that the PlayStation 4 was loud, and that's because it came to when it came to redesign for the PlayStation 5, they said we spent 20 cents a unit for the cooling system for the PlayStation 4. So it was a fan, and it was 2 fans. You could hear them. They said on the new PlayStation 5, we spent $1 on each unit. So those are the decisions they're making of like, oh, that I don't want to spend an extra 80 cents. We're going to ship 11 million of these things. That adds up, And so if we spend 20 cents, but the thing sounded like a jet when you would play a game. You're like, I think this thing's going to lift up. It's going to lift out of my
energy. The VTOL edition.
Yeah, I think it's gonna
PlayStation.
There's tons of videos online and people just firing it up, going, "Man, I think this thing's gonna lift off my entertainment system." But that's all this.
You start off hearing the whine, and you're waiting for the Top Gun thing.
Oh
to
yeah,
kick
you
off
just
in the
run out of the room because you think it's gonna blow up, like there's gonna be shrapnel over. But like that's the thing is like, so like yeah, you want to pay 20 cents for this cooling unit. Now you're paying $1. Like now we're paying the price for all that. And I think this tax plan of like telling people, hey guys, you're not going to be able to run anywhere. Like this is more about America and our production. It doesn't have to do with you being,
which is the purpose. That's the purpose of this tax is to set a floor. Like even if you're producing overseas, you're not paying less than this amount on those profits.
Right, because you're shipping them back into the States or whatever, like.
And that's kind of the purpose. But there is a whole argument, and gosh, I can't remember his name at the moment. There's a Democratic guy who's actually kind of fighting this corporate gains tax being, or not corporate gains, corporate income tax being raised all the way up to 28%. Like he's fighting for more like 25.
Yeah.
Because he's even looking at like, hey, we have to be economically competitive. And I can't remember his name at the moment.
Oh, you probably forgot it because he's a liberal hippie. No, I don't know.
Well, actually, he was also the one that was causing issues for passing.
Is that Manchin?
Yes.
As soon as you said issues in a Democrat, I was like, you mean Manchin? That guy who's like...
Yes.
He's one of the guys that, like, if you're in a meeting, Democrat or Republican, you're like, okay, we see eye to eye. He's the one that stands up in the back and goes, actually, and then everybody's like, like
he's the Democratic version of John McCain from a decade ago.
Yeah. It's one of those. Every time Manchin comes up, Joe Manchin, right? Is he?
Yes.
What is he? He's not Rhode Island. Where is?
Oh Lord, don't ask me that, man.
I don't know. But I know Joe Manchin. That's his name.
Virginia, West Virginia.
Okay.
So the other big thing in here that I wanted to talk about, and we've talked about it multiple times, and I said I would explain it, so I wanted to explain it, is the 1031 exchange.
Okay, thank God.
So the 1031 exchange.
I just want to, before you start this, I just want to say as an English major, I am actually interested to hear what this exchange is.
So the 1031 exchange is a tax loophole for real estate investors.
Okay.
And what it allows is that if you are selling real estate, you do not have to pay capital gains on that if you use that money in a for-like purchase, basically buying more property.
Oh, right.
In a certain period of time. I believe the limit is 6 months, and I should know this with my real estate background, so I'm going to trust the 6 months number, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
You have a limited amount of time to buy. Otherwise, you do have to pay the capital gains on it.
That's nice. That's actually nice because it'll take you time to look for something and find something.
Correct. Yeah. And there's some real value to the 1031 exchange economically, right? Like it inspires people to not take the money out. It inspires them to keep the money in the system, continuing to rotate the money through the economic system so it's moving through.
Right.
The Biden proposal closes that loophole. They want to get rid of the 1031 exchange for anything higher than $500,000 in gains. However, again, I haven't seen specifics. Nothing I've read has specified. Is it $500,000 per transaction? Or
like
is
in a
it
year?
$500,000 in a year?
Mm.
So if it's $500,000 in a year, then you're going to take your large investors who own multiple properties, and they're just going to hold on to their properties,
Right.
reinvest in those properties, and they're not going to sell stuff, which is going to push up housing prices because there's going to be less inventory available. And
Yeah, no, that kind of sucks. I mean, because
the people that are buying into the market are going to be your large institutional investors who don't care anyway because they're paying taxes regardless.
right, yeah, they don't give a crap.
So it's going to take the mom and pop out of the industry if it's $500,000 per year. If it's $500,000 per unit, it's not as bad, and you're still able to 1031 exchange $500,000 or below in gains. But
that's interesting.
it's going to have some real ramifications. I follow a guy on YouTube called Meet Kevin. And Meet Kevin has about a 15-minute long YouTube video where he talks about, Biden just killed the real estate market.
It's a bold title for a video.
And he goes into specifics about like what the real ramifications are on this. Now, Meet Kevin is a financial YouTuber. He's a millennial YouTuber. You want to say he's 28, 29, maybe 30.
He's a kid.
But he started off in real estate as a real estate agent and got into real estate investing. And then now he does stock investing, his videos on how to build your wealth. And so as a heavy real estate investor with a large real estate portfolio, like he's looking at this like, crap.
Yeah. But again, this is proposed. This hasn't passed, right?
Correct. It's proposed, not passed.
Yeah, and like the way you're pitching it, I do think it would be very difficult to get it passed,
And again, I look at this like negotiating 101. Whoever asks first is more likely to win. Mm. So like anyone watching this, listening to this.
That's how I got married.
Anyone, right?
That's how it worked. I asked first, and she said yes, so I win.
Would you have said no if she asked first, Joe?
No, I mean, but then this would have been the story for her. She would have been able to tell the story on her podcast. She'd been doing much better for herself.
So I think this is negotiating 101, right? Like I think lots of people are like, these numbers are preposterous. This is crazy. This is like you go into a job interview, that like the median pay is 50,000,
like,
and so you're like, I want 65, and they're like, well, we can pay you 52,
and you're like, sold. Yeah, like you're like I got $2,000 more.
But if they come out and they're like, well, we start at 40,
yeah,
and you're like, well, I really wanted 60. You're less likely to drag up to your actual number. Yeah. So I think this is the Democrats coming out, Biden coming out, basically like, hey, we're going to like put all these numbers out that are just nuts, and we're going to try and negotiate back down. And now you've got the Republicans that are coming out with like, how about 900 million?
Wow.
Like half.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if this is those things you always read about that no one reads the whole thing, right? They have pages and assistants and all that, and like the whips, whatever. And we probably talk interns. We would be the sucky interns that they'd throw this on the desk like at a Friday night. Like, you guys got to read this. I got to talk about it Tuesday morning on the floor, and you're just like, oh man.
Here's your 300 pages. Here's your 300 pages. Here's your 300
and
pages.
And then we're all ordering Chinese food late, and we're sitting there going, okay, so.
Aren't you glad you're not in politics, Jeff?
I don't know. Sometimes I think. It's one of those things. Politics. It's one of those things. I don't know. You think like, oh, I can make a difference, and then you read the news. You're like, no, nobody can make a difference. It's a impenetrable system of. It's like that Greek labyrinth, with the Minotaur at the end. You just look at it and go, I mean, the Minotaur is somewhere. I don't know where he is. It's.
I think of.
Did anybody ask for a Minotaur? Like everybody's like, no, I didn't. We don't want one.
Why do we even have this? Like, I didn't. What? Huh?
What is the purpose of this? Oh, I don't know. It's make everybody doubt themselves. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. It's the idea of they're asking first to be bold in the first step of let's get this going.
Yep.
And we'll see how it goes. I know that it will now be more of a fight because it's closer to 50-50 now in the House or whatever.
Really close to 50-50 in the Senate.
Yeah. So. That'll at least make it interesting, because that was one thing. No matter what I thought for the Trump legislation, it was a thing where you're like, oh, man, like it's just going to go to the Senate, and There's no wiggle room. It's just like a rubber stamp. So that's the thing. So yeah, I can't think of. So do you have any closing thoughts about this? Because I think we're near the hour.
Yeah, we're at about our time. We've got a few more minutes left, but not a lot.
Yeah.
The thing for me on this, like, I look at this and as a libertarian, like,
You're one of those.
I know. Like, I'm a small government, least amount of government necessary, right? Like, government's responsibility is to set up the environment,
right,
and the framework for us to live in, and then provide the most support possible to reinforce our individual freedoms and liberties.
Right.
They're not here to tell us how to live.
Okay, Ayn Rand. Okay, cool.
Right? That's the ideal, right?
Right.
I mean, this is
the ideal. Right.
The libertarian ideal is just as fictitious as the communist ideal, right? Like, neither of them is actually ever really going to happen.
True.
And both have to own that.
Yeah.
I own that, but this is like the ideal. We need laws. We need governments. Yeah. Anarchy doesn't work. Sorry, Penn Jillette.
What? I mean, maybe in a magic show. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard it, but like Penn Jillette has come out and basically said, like, I want like one step short of anarchy in government. Like, he's super small government.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's naive. The same as I think communism, socialism is naive.
Oh, yes.
Like,
yeah, I think it is. I think all that's naive. I think we could do better.
So adding this massive amount of additional taxes, I see as just stifling growth. I think it stifles innovation. I think you create a whole level of government dependency where people no longer have the freedom to pursue because government basically tells them, like, hey, we're going to give you all this stuff. And because of that, self-determination goes away. If I don't have to try, I just take this stuff for free. Now, there's a counter argument to that, and this is where I own it, right? Like, this is where that kind of falls apart. Like, we all need support at some point.
Yeah, I mean, just look at 2020. I mean, that was a great example of people needing help.
Right. And the government stepped in, and it was bipartisan, and kind of everyone agreed, like, the government needs to step in to do it,
except
and we're going to
I just want to say, except for Manchin, that was like, Joe Manchin, that was like, I don't know if I'm going to, you're like, Joe, shut up for once and just pass the bill. Like, just sit down, man.
Does someone get a rag with some ether and just
we're all on the
take him
same
out?
page for once, you know, like it.
There's always going to be a balance. It's just, I think this is a huge overreach in taxes. And this is a very massive movement in the United States at the moment to vilify the wealthy and the rich. And don't take that to mean that there's not, like, people in this country that have so much money they'll never spend it.
Right. Big FU money, as I call it.
I mean, just like Bezos, Gates, Ballmer, Cuban.
FU money, like, I don't have to do that. FU.
They're never going to spend that money. What was it? I was reading in an article today that Bill and Melinda Gates, like, their estate is larger than the economy of Monaco.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Like, seriously?
I know, yeah. They do a lot of philanthropic stuff, though. But
they do, and you know, I had the fortune of working for a philanthropic arm of a billionaire, and I got to see how that works, and so I have a really weird perspective on that. Like,
well, they're gonna microchip us, so that's.
I got the first. You got the
first microchip, and now you're gonna get the second one. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the other one because I'm not hearing any of the updates from Microsoft about the next latest innovation.
You're still at 4G. Yeah, when you get the next one, you'll be at 5G.
I hope.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for it.
I would like some 5G. If I just have to get a chip in me to get 5G, that'd be great. No, I think I agree with you, the stifle innovation, but I think it will be for a different reason. Because to me, that seems like a chestnut that is always brought out when you talk about taxing the rich. Well, it'll stifle. That's the first thing that's said. It'll stifle innovation. It'll stifle this. And I think it's because those people, again, there will have to be a come to Jesus moment where you say, listen, are you going to try to make money now, or what about the long term? You know? So, like, what are you going to want to do for the long term of the country, and not just you buying another yacht? So the stifling creativity, in my opinion, is just something that the rich people say because they don't actually want to step up and do something about the massive problems, because a lot of people bring up the fact over and over again, a lot of these people could get together and end world hunger. They could end poverty. They could start philanthropic stuff to, clothe the homeless. And I think it's because they keep saying, well, if I get taxed too much, I don't know what I could do. I don't know if I could do anything. If the government wasn't taxing me so much, I wouldn't be working with one hand tied behind my back. And I think you are right. They will say that it stifles them and stuff, but I don't think it is for some altruistic libertarian reason. Like you said, it's not anything to do with a framework of us to live our lives. It's the fact that they're very comfortable and there's no reason to literally rock the yacht in this thing of, because they're not in a boat like the rest of us. They are definitely on a yacht with a helicopter on it. And so I think that is cynically where I think is the idea that they are going to make their money and just talk about how crappy the government is and how much the government is stifling them, and these, instead of really looking at going, well, but again, the counter argument to that is like, can the government follow through on these things? Can they follow through on this infrastructure plan? Can they follow through on this? So, if everybody, was awake the next day and felt good about giving away their tax money to the government, would those things come to fruition? I don't know if they would or not.
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, I don't know if I necessarily, there's a balance in that for sure. Like there's the innovation that it creates for wealthy people is finding creative and clever ways to move money around so they don't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, it's 3-card money, like on a $1 billion scale of whatever.
Yeah.
So
the thing for me is like I'm sorry, I'm looking up something online at the same time. I'm a big proponent.
You're looking up Joe Manchin? You're trying to make it.
How many times has Joe Manchin said no?
Yeah, don't. Google.
How contrarian is Mr. Manchin?
Chrome just shuts down. Your Chrome extender just shuts down.
The thing for me is like, I am all for government programs and assistances that empower people and lift people up. Like we talked about in our last podcast on UBI. Yeah. Right? Like, if we have ways, means, programs, and policies that lift people up. Like there's been, we know Jeff and have talked to him about kind of...
okay, sorry. I was like, who?
Jeff who? I just want to bring up the last name.
No, that's fine. Yeffe. I know Yeffe. I know who you're talking about.
He's worked on a program there in your area that worked to put people into homes because they found that it was actually more affordable for the government to permanently house or to short-term house people, like to prevent them from ending up homeless, than it was to try to give them services when they had become homeless. Right? I'm all for programs like that. I think that's fantastic because it's a better use of government money. And guess what? When someone has a roof over their head and some self-determination, then they do better. Yeah, they do. They're more likely to perform better in rehab. They're more likely to stick with counseling. Admitted, the recidivism rates are super, super high. It's really sad. But I don't like government programs that create a dependency. I don't like government programs that don't lift people out of it, where they end up just stuck in the system for the rest of their lives. And you see so many of these programs where people just end up like, oh, well, I'm just getting this. This is what I have. I don't have to have any better, where there's zero growth. There's no empowerment. There's no pride. There's no ownership. And then you're reliant on the government.
Well, that's another thing. And we talked about a little bit UBI. Those numbers don't lie. It was just a town, but like people went from 20% unemployment to 37% full-time employment, and they were getting a government stipend. So they're being employed and they're bettering themselves, and they're giving government money. It basically is just a pressure valve. But so I didn't know. That's all I realized. Do you anything else before because I was going to close out the show, and I actually know what I'm going to talk about now, so it's not going to be a surprise like your show. So
sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I think that's it. I think we did a good job. Me being a layman, liberal major, English major, trying to go through that. But yeah, read those articles, stuff like that. Next month, I was going to put it off, but I think we will talk about the semiconductor shortage. I was thinking about doing it and when we would do it and stuff like that, but I think it just keeps coming up. A lot of podcasts I listen to are gaming podcasts. it keeps coming up in stories. PlayStation just announced, hey, we're going to have shortages until 2022 of our new console. And that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? So there's a lot more out there that are short. I've heard, anecdotes of Ford and GM just parking cars because they can't put chips in them. So that's what we'll talk about next month. So it'll be about the chip shortage thing. So, do you... Go ahead, Evan.
And I think it's a great topic. It's impacting every aspect of the economy.
Yeah.
Whether or not people recognize it.
No, I think it's one of those things, too, where I kind of heard
of
rumblings about it, and then not just gaming, but hearing more and more about it. When, like CNBC Money Talk is writing articles about it in Bloomberg, then you're like, holy crap, this is like a serious thing.
Even Intel's looking at putting factories back in the United States again.
What? No, that'll be part of what we talk about. But, so, Avin, where can people find you, and what do you want to plug before we take out?
So, obviously, I have my real estate business, Your Agent Guide. They can find me at youragentguide.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/youragentguide, all one word, where I basically help people find good, qualified, professional real estate agents in their area to help them with their home purchase or sale instead of just, working with anyone else in the bottom end of the bell curve.
It's good. Yeah, I've seen some of your videos. They're good. So if you want to get a hold of us at the podcast, go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com and say that it is for the Grief of Politics. That is the other website or the other email address I use for my other podcast, but I want to get the most amount of blood out of the stone. So go there, leave us an email, and let us know what episode you're talking about, so that way we know how to answer you, because if we're obviously talking about the chip shortage and you write about the Capitol attack, we're going to be like, what are they? Oh, right. So just let us know what episode that is. gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Go there. And you can address it to either Avin or I. We'll both read it. I will share it with him because I have all the access to all the accounts. And I have another podcast called Gaming with Grief that hits every Monday morning at 7 a.m. If you're interested in games at all, go there. Listen to me. It's a solo podcast. I do have guests on. I've had Avin on. I should probably have.
Wait, you're a gamer?
I am. I'm considered a casual gamer though, because I don't put 900 hours into Destiny or something. But I'll probably have to have you back on. I think maybe because I haven't had any podcast in like a year, and I just went over episode 100. I'm on episode like 105 right now, so it's pretty crazy that I'm still going. So yeah, you can find me there. There's comments you can leave below those podcasts. You can go to the website. It's www.gamewithgrief.com. So you can go there, leave a comment below those videos, and you can also leave me an email about that podcast if you want. Again, that's gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Anything else, Avin?
I think that's everything for this week, yeah.
So semiconductors next month, guys. So yeah. Oh, and gals, and whoever. I don't care. I'm not gendering you. What I'm saying is read up on semiconductors, and we'll all be more educated before it. And I'm probably going to have to learn about more numbers, and that's going to hurt my head. So you guys have a good month. We will talk to you next month. Talk to you later.